Namaste. Shuklambaradharam Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Jayet Sarvavighnopashantaye Sarvavighnopashantaye तांडवं सहजं यस्य परमाणुस्वरूपिणः दिव्यरूपं शिवं शान्तं वन्दे शम्भुमापतिम् वन्दे शम्भुमापतिम् Welcome to this symposium on Jaati, Varna and Caste, which is the symposium in the series of symposiums that have been started recently by INDICA. As you know, INDICA works for the protection, preservation and promotion of Indic culture, Hindu Renaissance, and as part of its activities, it has been conducting symposiums, conferences, workshops. Conferences was the first idea. We used to have conferences in the beginning, and we have already reached 25 in the number of conferences. And in the format of conferences, we have a call for papers. Scholars send their abstracts, and some of them get selected, and those selected papers are presented. But it usually includes a given number of invited scholars also. After a while, we thought that these invited scholars can be separately invited for a program. That is what is symposium. Symposium has no selected papers from the abstracts or something like that. It is just all invited scholars only. This program today is also such a program of such an event of speeches by, talks by invited scholars. We choose the scholars based on their expertise. So we have invited experts only in the field. Earlier, we had symposiums on various topics. One of them was actually connected to this Jati topic only because it is on Jati Puranas. We had a symposium on Jati Puranas. We had a symposium on Devadasi tradition also. And there were symposiums on many other topics like that. And then we thought this is a very burning topic, so we should take it up, this topic of Jati, Varna and Caste. And what is interesting is, number one, I should tell you that the word Jati has become popular and has come into circulation only recently, only because of the work of Indic scholars. Earlier in literature, earlier in sociological literature or anthropological literature, there were only two words. Caste, which is the word, English word that they use for the system, that sociological situation that we are talking about, and the word Varna that they drew from Sanskrit texts. But gradually, the words like Jati, which is a Hindi word, which is popular all over India. Among the South Indian languages, even Tamil uses the word Jadi. But in Telugu and Kannada, they use the words Kula, Kula in Kannada, Kulamu in Telugu. These words have come into vogue because of the discussions from the Indic side to tell the world that there is a different system than Varna. The studies on caste in fields like sociology and anthropology are not at all rare. In fact, it has been a very big topic in the sociology of and anthropology of India. There were Indian scholars like M.N. Srinivas, T.N. Madan. There were foreign scholars like Louis Dumont, Mackie Marriott, and there were later new Indian scholars from a leftist perspective like Gurye, and there were sociologists like Andhra Bethle. So there was a very big amount of academic study on caste. But ultimately, what resulted is every time one or the other kind of misunderstanding and misrepresentation of the system. My teachers of cultural anthropology used to tell me that to check the validity of your study, you have to go back to the people whom you have studied and check with them whether their perspective and your representation are matching or not. I don't think any of these anthropological scholars ever did this. That is so unfortunate. Because if you go back to the people who are living in these systems like Jaati and Varna and check whether the representation of that system in their uh, academic studies matches with the local understanding or not, there is an ample difference. There is a very big gap between the reality as perceived by the participants in the system and its representation in the academic studies. Another immediate trigger for this kind of discussions today is the recent uh, increased attack on the Hindu society taking caste as a topic. And it went to such an extent that recently a journal came up whose name is Caste itself. Caste is the name of the research journal, international research journal. And it says that it studies discriminations all over the world, social discriminations all over the world. And all those worldwide social discriminations are being called as caste by it. And there are books also which say that caste is universal, caste is everywhere. And that creates a big problem for uh, people, diaspora who went abroad, when they say or when they are perceived as people following caste. And that is already leading to laws being made against caste discrimination and all that. So that is again another trigger for an increased response from the Indic side towards representations or misrepresentations, understandings or misunderstandings of this system. When we come to this Indic response also, it is not monolithic. That is what you are going to see this whole day. Throughout the day, you are going to see that the scholars are not going to speak in a single voice. Every scholar that is going to be talking in this symposium is from the Indic side only. They are not, none of them is a Hindu phobic scholar, none of them is a left liberal scholar, none of them wants to talk against India as a culture based using this Jati Varna caste. But how to deal with this question of Jati or Varna or caste? In this, there are diverse opinions, not just diverse, sometimes even conflicting and contradicting opinions among the Indic scholars themselves. That is what actually makes this symposium very special compared to the earlier symposiums we conducted. In all the earlier symposiums, opinions were almost harmonious. They, if you are talking about Jati Puranas, almost the same, or Devadas is almost the same. But today, the opinions are going to be from within Indic tradition only, but there are going to be sometimes apparently conflicting, sometimes conflicting to certain extent. A nuanced difference of opinion might exist among various scholars. These differences have a thread, the conflict has a thread in it. It is this. We can actually call this a spectrum of ideas about Jati, Varna, and caste. At the one end, one extreme of this spectrum, there are uh, traditional scholars who think that Varna system has nothing wrong in it, and the criticism that it has led to problems is just an imagination. People lived harmoniously in this country. All the differences that are now being talked about are just being created by the colonial rulers or the shenanigans or something like that. And on the other extreme, on the Indic side, you have a group of scholars who think that no, no, India has to get rid of Varna, Jati, caste, whatever it is. Annihilation of caste is necessary here. This is a wrong system that has come into existence in the course of history of India. So it has lived its life beyond its expiry. It has to go. We have to somehow send it out. And in between these two extreme ideas, you have people who try to explain that there are uh, it is not as romantic, as idealized as some people try to make it out. Actually, there were issues, there were problems, there were dissatisfactions, there were protests, there were discussions, even in the history of India, um, towards Varna or towards Jati or whatever. And there are some scholars who argue that that is the beauty of Hindu system, that unlike some other religions where reform is positively, consciously opposed, Hindu system, Hindu tradition always had a scope for reformation, and these reformations included the reformations in the area of Jati Varna also. There were ideas, counter ideas, debates, discussions around this topic articulated in written texts, oral texts, and all that. And there are some scholars who did empirical studies on how actually these systems are working on the ground. Particularly, scholars inspired by Professor S.M. Balagangadhara of Belgium, uh, scholars like Duncan Zalki and others, they wanted to see how that theorization by Professor S.M. Balagangadhara actually works. And one of the online magazine platforms of Indica called Indica Facts, it published India Facts, published a collection of all these empirical studies by uh, scholars inspired by Professor S.M. Balagangadhar and others also, how they were checking whether the present theorizations from the left liberal side, the contemporary academic side, and all that match with the reality or not. And the other extreme of no, you should go also has a Reformation movement influence. In the 19th century, when there was this Reformation movement, movements like Arya Samaj, Brahma Samaj, at that time, there was this theory that the Dharma Shastras had interpolations. They wanted to make corrections. They wanted to bring a cleaned up version of these Dharma Shastra texts like Manusmriti. And recently, the statement of the RSS head Bhagwatji also was talking about these interpolations. So there is this theory of interpolations in Dharma Shastras. So you have an entire range, a spectrum of scholars from one end to the other, and those who talk about uh, the system should go, the Jati Varna has to go, are sometimes looked at as those people who are actually victims of the uh, guilt that has been imposed on India from outsiders. So they use the word guilt tripping. You are getting into guilt tripping. And those who are at the other extreme of everything is fine, there are no protests, there are no dissatisfactions, it is all created, also are criticized for their unnecessary idealization and romanticization of the reality. So, in between these two, truth must lie somewhere, and we, the Indic scholars, have to put our heads together and try to see where we can take a consistent opinion, or a completely consistent picture can never be possible, but at least try to understand each other when we express our ideas. At least we can present to the world that this is the range of ideas that exists within Indic circles with regard to Jati, Varna, and caste.